glad to have Prabhu on the call. Prabhu, we first heard Prabhu's classes in the Mayapur TV, and we heard his classes, me and my father, and we were just so impressed with his way to articulate the philosophy and how much he has understood the depth of the philosophy, and we were very eager to hear him. So Prabhu, now it's 8:05 in on the East Coast. Prabhu will speak for about 1 hour, and then after that there will be question and answers. So Achintya Prabhu, you can go ahead. Hare Krishna.
Okay, see, I'm using a phone. Okay, so for some reason I'm not able to use my computer today. So I'm using a phone. It would be helpful if you could just kindly read out the verses along with the translation and purport. Okay,
Okay,
where is the purport? I'll speak. There are two purports. I'll speak on the first purport first, and then I'll speak on the other purport next. Yeah.
sure. So this is Canto 1, Chapter 10, um,
15 to 19.
15 to 19. Okay. So should I share my screen? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, yeah, that'll be good. That'll be good. Yes.
So should I read the verse and the translation?
Small for me on the same screen. Just, can you
Okay,
just, yeah.
I'll shall read it. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 10, Text 15. Mridanga Sankha Bhairyascha Veena Panava Gomukha Dhundhuri Anaka Ghantadya Nedu Dundu Bhayastatha. Translation. While the Lord was departing from the place of Hastinapur, different types of drums like the mridanga, dhola, nagra, dhunduri, and dundubi, and flutes of different types, the veena, gomukha, and bheri, all sounded together to show him honor. Let me just go to advanced view. Text 16. Prasada shikararudha kuru naryo didrikshaya bavrushu kushumay krishnam prema vridha smitekshana. Out of loving desire to see the Lord, the royal ladies of the Kurus got up on top of the palace, and smiling with affection and shyness, they showered flowers upon the Lord. I shall read the purport also, Prabhu.
Yes, translation book. Yes.
Okay. Purport. Shyness is a particular extra natural beauty of the fair sex, and it commands respect from the opposite sex. This custom was observed even during the days of the Mahabharata, more than 5,000 years ago. It is only the less intelligent persons not well versed in the history of the world who say that observance of separation of female from male is an introduction of the Mohammedan period in India. This incident from the Mahabharata period proves definitely that the ladies of the palace observed strict parda, restricted association with men. And instead of coming down in the open air where Lord Krishna and others were assembled, the ladies of the palace went up on the top of the palace and from there paid the respects to Lord Krishna by showers of flowers. It is definitely stated here that the ladies were smiling there on the top of the palace, checked by shyness. This shyness is a gift of nature to the fair sex, and it enhances their beauty and prestige, even if they are of less important family or even if they are less attractive. We have practical experience of this fact. A sweeper woman commanded the respect of many respectable gentlemen simply by manifesting a lady's shyness. Half naked ladies in the street do not command any respect, but a shy sweeper's wife commands respect from all. Human civilization, as conceived as of by the sages of India, is to help one free himself from the clutches of illusion. The material beauty of a woman is an illusion because actually the body is made of earth, water, fire, air, etc. But because there is the association of the living spark with matter, it appears to be beautiful. No one is attracted by an earthen doll, even if it is most perfectly prepared to attract the attentions of others. The dead body has no beauty because no one will accept the dead body of a so-called beautiful woman. Therefore, the conclusion is that the spirit spark is beautiful, and because of the soul's beauty, one is attracted by the beauty of the outward body. The Vedic wisdom therefore forbids us to be attracted by false beauty. But because we are now in the darkness of ignorance, the Vedic civilization allows because we are now in the darkness of ignorance, the Vedic civilization allows very restricted mixing of women and men. They say that the woman is considered to be the fire and the man is considered to be the butter. The butter must melt in association with the fire, and therefore they may be brought together only when it is necessary. And shyness is a check to the unrestricted mixing. It is nature's gift, and it must be utilized.
Okay, I'll offer my prayers and then I'll speak a little on this purport. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamahim Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamadam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tams Jivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Varijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Jayapataka Swaminiti Namine Nama Acharya Padayane Taikrapa Padayane Gorakata Damdayana Grigramatarine Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Gopi Paranadana Dasa Iti Namine Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauramani Pracharine Nivishashunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Ukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim mikripatamaham bande Shri Gurudantari namikripatamaham bande Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Katanchana Smrite Yasmin Dushkaram Sukaram Bhavet Vismrite Vipritam Syat Sri Chaitanyam Namam. Okay, so a few months ago, the devotee who assigns Bhagavatam classes, he called me and asked me on one particular day, could you give the Bhagavatam class? So then I told him that I'm assigned for the Russian class. But before he told me could he give the class, he assumed that I would be able to do it, and he just gave me the verse number also. No, and then when I told him that I have to give a Russian class, he assigned a different day for me. But being curious, I went and looked at what is the verse and the purport, and when I read the verse, immediately I told my wife, Krishna saved me. This is one of the most politically incorrect purports, So, and then finally, Guru Dayal Prabhu, called me last week and asked me to give the Bhagavatam class, and then agreed readily. And when I saw the verse, so I told my wife, there it is, it comes back again. So it looks like Krishna has his own sense of humor. So Shri Radha Natavar, right? So Shri Radha Natavar has arranged such that I can't avoid speaking on that verse. So there it is. Okay. So I'll try my best. As we had a professor while in the university, he would say, I'll throw some light on the topic and it may generate some heat. So we'll see how it goes, the question and answers. Okay. So the first thing that we need to understand is the context of the purport. So the context of the purport is a civilization in which men and women were kept separate. So from the beginning of life, if this system is adopted, then the quality of shyness naturally manifests in a woman. However, if we are brought up in a culture where men and women are taught to intermingle right from the beginning, and then at a later stage, when we encounter Prabhupada's teachings, and especially for a woman, when she encounters something like this, then the natural question comes: is it applicable to me? What does it even mean? Because they may have been brought up in a civilization which does not even recognize qualities of shyness as something good. In fact, these days it's considered as detrimental, right? So then the question comes, I mean, when we read Prabhupada's books, so what does it mean? How to apply this? It can't be done at a later stage in life when one has not been brought up in that culture. So this is something which is very important to understand, that you can't expect this to manifest automatically at some later stage in life, you know. So it essentially refers to a culture where this has to begin from the beginning. So then the point of this is that if you notice, Prabhupada very clearly talks about Vedic culture is meant to keep the men and the women separate as much as possible. Because Prabhupada used to say, man is good, woman is good. But if when you combine them, then all the complications begin. You know, I think several of us would know this, that to live as a man separately, to live as a woman separately is one thing, but to live together as a husband and wife, it has its own set of complications. And unless we are Krishna conscious, we wouldn't know how to handle those complications. That's why Prabhupada said that man is good, woman is good, but if we combine them together, that's where all the complications start. So what to speak of in marriage, even before marriage, if that mixing happens, then it becomes extremely complicated. So because the men and women were kept separate right from the beginning, so the woman, the whole prevalent culture would be such that the woman would feel reluctant to mix with men. That reluctance manifests as shyness, you know. And as Prabhupada explains this is a fact that when I have the same experience that Prabhupada himself mentions this, that Prabhupada writes same experience, I have exactly the same experience. Like when I was growing up in a city, and then there was once a village woman who came and who had just recently moved to the city and who had started because they were poverty stricken and they needed to get some money to earn. And the exact thing that Prabhupada mentioned, that she started sweeping, you know. And it is a fact that because she came from a village and she was very shy, and she because of which she naturally commanded respect. Nobody would the people that we in our street who lived, everybody had a natural sense of respect for her. Nobody would behave with her loosely. So this is a fact which Prabhupada mentions, that someone brought up in that culture, they manifest that, especially those days, maybe 30 years ago, in the Indian villages, it is still prevalent. But today, I think even the villages are spoiled by the by culture of internet and all these cable TV. But during those days, you didn't have those things. So when this lady came and she was actually sweeping the street in which I was living, so people are very respectful towards her. I've seen this practically. In fact, even before I read Prabhupada's books, I had noticed this particular thing, that this woman commanded so much respect. I couldn't put my finger on why it was so. But after I read Prabhupada's purport, then this is the same reason, that this lady, when I was in my high school days, I'd noticed that fact. Okay. So then the question comes up, what exactly is the relevance of this, or the applicability of this to devotee women, and how do we deal with something like this, which is so considered so politically incorrect? Asking a woman to be shy, you know, and not to mix with men, does it mean, what exactly does all this mean? Okay, so let me approach it from the point of view of Krishna consciousness. Okay, so I'll just share something on this on the chat, and I'll read out from there. This is part of a talk that I gave. I just took some excerpt from that talk, and I'm just going to share some small part of it, which is relevant to our discussion today. Okay, can you see this on the screen?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, so this is something which Prabhupada writes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I've titled this called as Women in Krishna Consciousness. And another thing, my wife reminded me that of all temples that you're giving class, this is Sri Sri Radha Natwar of the Columbus Temple, which is once all women's temple. So Krishna has increased the sense of humor by asking you to talk on this purport. She was saying. Okay, anyway, let's go ahead. As members of the Krishna consciousness movement, we belong to the family or disciplic succession of Saraswati Goswami, and thus we are known as Saraswatas. Obeisances are therefore offered to the spiritual master as Saraswata Deva, or a member of the Saraswata family. Namaste Saraswate Deve, whose mission is to broadcast the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gauramani Pracharine, and to fight with impersonalists and voidists, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshadarine. This is also the occupational duty of Sanatan Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and Anupama Goswami. So here, what Prabhupada does is this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, 10.84 purport, Adilila. So Prabhupada here defines what we are, clearly defines. Members of the Krishna conscious movement means both men and women. All of them are put together, or even children, of course. All are members of the Krishna conscious movement. And so our identity is defined in two integral ways. There are this is a two-pronged definition. One is whose mission, what is the mission of the members? To broadcast the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's one. The other thing is to fight with impersonalists and voidists. Now, these combined together is the meaning of being a member of the Krishna conscious movement. Specifically, we are referred to as the Saraswatas. And Prabhupada traces this. It doesn't say that this is unique to only Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He traces this back all the way to Sanatan Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and Anupama Goswami. So we are the Saraswata Rupanugas. And what is the characteristic of the Saraswata Rupanugas? I'm reading again. They broadcast the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That is specifically Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's desire that it should be spread all over the world. So Prabhupada identifies with that and says that the member of the Saraswata family means whose mission is to broadcast the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then he says, and to fight with the impersonalists and voidists. So Saraswata means these two things. The Saraswata Rupanugas, Saraswata Rupanuga means to spread the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and to fight with the impersonal and voidists, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. This is very clearly, explicitly, unambiguously defined what we are. Now, how do we enact it? Now, there's a pastime during Prabhupada's time which happened, which relates to a woman in Krishna consciousness. This is from a talk. I mean, this is from if we go down the middle of the screen share. Prabhupada says, just like our student Govinda Dasi in Hawaii, in a meeting, she became very angry when the so-called incarnation of God, perhaps you know this incident, and the people did not say, of course, Govinda Dasi, but they heard her husband, Gaurasundara. But she became very angry that these rascals and so many things she spoke, chuckles. So she did right like a heroine. I very much liked it. So we should be very much angry when there is anything against God and God's devotee. But generally, for my personal interest, I should not be angry. All right, if you like to call me by ill names, I don't mind. You go on with your business. I do not become angry. I'm continuing to read. So Prabhupada is very clearly making a point that we should not think, oh, we are superior to all these people and simply call them rascals. That's not the point. The point is, if somebody calls us, hey, you are a rascal, we accept. Yes, we have fallen. We are the most fallen among all people. We don't become angry for that. But if there is a wrong philosophy that is presented, or if there is something against God's devotees that is presented, then a devotee is supposed to become, Prabhupada is saying, so we should be very much angry if you notice it. So Prabhupada says, before this, Prabhupada actually wrote a letter. I was so much enlivened by hearing Prabhupada is speaking. I am so much enlivened. Remember that our philosophy is Yasya Prasadat Bhagavad Prasado. You're supposed to enliven Prabhupada. So here is what she did. I was so much enlivened by hearing your spirit of preaching activities. I'm proud that a young girl like you is so much spirited in Krishna consciousness. Then he says, I've 1 minute. Then he says, I've asked back to God men to publish your heroic preaching activities under the heading of Heroine Govinda Dasi. This is an article which Prabhupada wanted to be published, which is published also in the Back to God. He writes later on in a letter to her husband Gaurasundar, I'm always thinking of Govinda Dasi. Although she is young and delicate, almost always suffering from some ailment, still she is so sincere devotee and spirited preacher that I have named her Heroine Govinda Dasi. This is July when he wrote the letter. Later on, 4 months later, in November, when he writes to her husband, he writes a letter to Gaurasundar. He does not say you and your wife. In fact, he says, he's giving some instruction. Then he says, you and Heroine Govinda Dasi do this. So Prabhupada was so fond of what she did that he repeatedly referred to her as Heroine Govinda Dasi even after 4 months. Okay. Okay, so I brought that up to show that this preaching is meant for all members of the Krishna consciousness movement. It is not meant only for the men or only for, only for the men. It's also meant for the women. It's also meant for the children. It's meant for everyone. And obviously, in fact, Govinda Dasi in that particular instance, she stood on a bench and claimed that this so-called incarnation of God is bogus. Now, if here is an example where she is not manifesting what is conventionally known as feminine shyness, right? What she's manifesting here is an extraordinary preaching spirit of trying to please Srila Prabhupada, because she's understood the definition of a Saraswata. So what she does is she's trying to preach the cult of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. She goes out with her husband to preach. And then when she hears some opposing philosophy, she protests against it vehemently. So this is expected from the members of the Krishna consciousness movement. So here you notice that everything has its place. It is not that when Prabhupada says that shyness is a characteristic which is very useful, which makes a woman more beautiful and dignified, that does not mean that when there is some nonsense, a woman has to keep quiet. In fact, Prabhupada is if you notice, Prabhupada is so enlivened by her. He calls her Heroine Govinda Dasi. He publishes article. He asks the Bhakta God to publish about her activity, and so on. I mean, the whole article is titled Heroine Govinda Dasi. That is the title of the article. So we should remember the purpose of all our activities is to please Srila Prabhupada. He is the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So we should conduct our activities in such a manner that it pleases Prabhupada. So for those of us who have been brought up, bred, as they say, in Western civilization, at a later stage in life, it may not be very easy to suddenly, it may not even be possible sometimes, because generally, unless a woman is trained right from the beginning, separation of the sexes and no co-education and so on, it's very difficult for her to manifest the quality of shyness. Even if she were to be able to do it, still, when it comes to the need to preach, she should be fearless, because that is a higher principle than the principle of shyness. Both are essential, but the higher principle should not be compromised simply for the sake of maintaining shyness. Yes, in all general interactions, that's fine. But when it comes to preaching, with her husband here, especially Govinda Dasi went, she didn't go alone to preach. She went with her husband, and when there was something which was opposing, which was spoken, she opposed it. Uh, so if you notice Prabhupada's teachings, if those of you have studied it carefully, for those women who actually joined the Krishna consciousness movement from the outside world, from the outside world, Prabhupada actually just encouraged them, do whatever you can nicely in Krishna consciousness. However, when it came to how to train girls born to devotee children, Prabhupada said, teach them a few things: how to be chaste and obedient to the husband, how to cook nicely. A few things he emphasized on that. In fact, he said that if you can do these things, I will personally find a husband, he says. And at the same time, sometimes devotees take that to mean that women should be just confined to at home without any education. That's not definitely what Prabhupada wanted, because the characteristic of an Uttama Adhikari is that he is very extremely well versed in Vedic in the scripture. So women are supposed to be Uttama Adhikari just as men. There's no difference. Everybody is trying to attain love of God. So she definitely has to be highly educated in Krishna consciousness. And as far as what she wants to do, Prabhupada said 64 arts are there, teach them 64 arts and things like that. So like Prabhupada used to give an example that when a bamboo is green, you can bend it and mold it to any shape. But when it is yellow, even if you try to mold it, it will break. So it's a different way of dealing with a green bamboo and a different way of dealing with a yellow bamboo. So children born to women, born to girls born to devotee parents, yes, to whatever extent we can mold them according to the classic definitions of women, not definitions, classic recommendations for women in the Vedic culture. But of course, the recommendation that women should be chaste and obedient to the husband, this is standard, irrespective of whether they've been brought up in the Vedic culture or not, because that's the most conducive for married life. Okay, that apart, but as much as possible, these different elements of Vedic culture, which speaks about shyness of women, can be best done if it is done with children of devotees. However, as the example of Govinda Dasi brought up was just to show that is not. We are not interested in creating a materially happy society. We are interested in preaching. That's very important. We're in a materially happy society where, in the name of we being Vedic, we try to be happy. We try to be happy in the dharmic sense. We're meant to be happy in the Krishna conscious sense. And in the Krishna conscious sense, we can be happy only if we preach. That is a fact. No matter what we try, I mean, if we just practice Krishna consciousness alone without trying to spread Krishna consciousness, it is very difficult. So because that's definitely not the process that is given to us by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The process is that you practice Krishna consciousness and simultaneously you preach Krishna consciousness. So no one is excluded from preaching, whether it is man, woman, children, anybody. Like Prabhupada sometimes asked Saraswati, who's Mother Malati's daughter. She's, I think, the GBC of Columbus, right? So her daughter, Prabhupada asked her to preach a Krishna consciousness to elderly gentlemen that he would meet, respectable gentlemen. Because Prabhupada said, when a child talks philosophy, elderly people listen carefully, listen seriously. So man, woman, everybody is expected to preach the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Okay, I think with that, let's move on to the next text, because we've got one more long purport. Go ahead.
Sure, Prabhu. Text 17. Sita tapatram jagraha mukta dama vibhushitam ratnadandam gudakesha priyapriyatamasyaha. At that time, Arjuna, the great warrior and conqueror of sleep, who was the intimate friend of the most beloved Supreme Lord, took up an umbrella which had a handle of jewels and was embroidered with lace and pearls. Purport. Gold, jewels, pearls, and valuable stones are used in the luxurious royal ceremonies. They are all nature's gifts and are produced by the hills, oceans, etc., by the order of the Lord, when man does not waste his valuable time in producing unwanted things in the name of necessities. By so called development of industrial enterprises, they are now using pots of gutta percha instead of
Yeah,
metals. What is it? It is gut.
it's an Indian thing. I don't know what's the English equivalent of it.
Gut, gutta percha instead of metals like gold, silver, brass, and copper. They are using margarine instead of purified butter, and 1/4 of the city population has no shelter. Text 18. Uddhava satyakishchaiva vyajane paramadbhute vikiryamana kusumai reje madhupati pati. Uddhava and Satyaki began to fan the Lord with decorated fans, and the Lord, as the master of Madhu, seated on scattered flowers, commanded them along the road. Text 19. अश्रूयन्त अश्रूयन्ताशिषा सत्यास् तत्र तत्र द्विजेरिता नानुरूपानुरूपश्च निर्गुणस्य गुणात्मना. It was being heard here and there that the benedictions being paid to Krishna were neither befitting nor unbefitting, because they were all absolute, all for the absolute, who was now playing the part of a human being. Purport. At places, there were sounds of Vedic benedictions aiming at the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. The benedictions were fitting in the sense that the Lord was playing the part of a human being, as if a cousin of Maharaj Yudhishthir, but they were also unfitting because the Lord is absolute and has nothing to do with any kind of material relatives. He is nirguna, or there are no
Relativity,
material qualities.
material relativities. It's
What is it?
material relativities. It is material
Oh,
relativities.
any kind of material relativities. Okay. He is nirguna, or there are no material qualities in him, but he is full of transcendental qualities. In the transcendental world, there is nothing contradictory, whereas in the relative world, everything has its opposite. In the relative world, white is the opposite conception of black, but in the transcendental world, there is no distinction between white and black. Therefore, the sounds of benedictions uttered by the learned Brahmanas here and there appear to be contradictory in relation with the absolute person. But when they are applied to the absolute person, they lose all contradiction and become transcendental. One example may clear this idea. Lord Sri Krishna is sometimes described as a thief. He is very famous amongst his pure devotees as Makhan Chor. He used to steal butter from the houses of neighbors at Vrindavan in his early age. Since then, he's famous as a thief. But in spite of his being famous as a thief, he's worshipped as a thief, whereas in the mundane world, a thief is punished and is never praised. Since he is the absolute personality of Godhead, everything is applicable to him. And still, in spite of all contradictions, he is the supreme personality of Godhead.
Okay. First thing that we need to understand is that what creates this concept of duality? It is the consciousness of material enjoyment which creates the sense of duality. The more we are free from the consciousness of material enjoyment, the more we become free from the concepts of duality. What is duality? This is auspicious. This is inauspicious. This is high. This is low. this is good, this is bad, like that. All the different things of in terms of this is hot, this is cold, all the different elements of duality that we know of. You know? So that comes from the consciousness for which is driven by material enjoyment. When consciousness is driven with a sense of material enjoyment, that is what creates the sense of duality. Why do I say that? Because the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Pandita Samadarshanaha. Pandita Samadarshanaha means one who's learned will see a learned Brahmana, a dog eater, elephant, all of them, all the living entities, they Samadarshanaha. Samadarshana means equal. So for him, there is nothing called high, low, good, bad. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, this is good, that is bad, is all illusion. Because in the material world, everything is actually bad. No, there's no such thing as good and bad. Because the material world has been created due to the desire of the jivas to enjoy separately. Just like the prison department, Prabhupada says, is created for the criminals. There's nothing called there is something good in a prison. Everything in a prison is bad. That is the idea. But whereas for the government, there is no difference between a civil department and a criminal department. For them, it is all there is a need for a civil department. There is a need for a criminal department. So they don't distinguish between civil department. They don't give more preference to civil department than to the criminal department. They give equal importance to everyone, and everything is all the department. Everything is taken care of. That's the Lord. For him, there's nothing called absolute. No concept of duality for him. But for us, it exists. Why does it exist? Because of the fact that we don't understand reality. The moment we understand reality, then the concept of duality vanishes. In what is that duality? What is reality? So reality is that concept of Krishna consciousness, which eliminates the concept of identification. Okay, what do I mean by concept of identification? Prabhupada gives the example, okay, let me give this example of, let's say, devotees, of course, don't watch movies. Let's say, but all of us, I think, have at some point in time have watched movies. So when you watch a movie, let's say your favorite hero or a heroine is in the movie, and when they feel vulnerable, so suddenly we also feel vulnerable. When they're acting well, we also feel happiness out of it. Actually, nothing is happening to us. We are identifying with the character in the movie and going through sensations of happiness and distress. It is not real in the sense that nothing is happening to you as a person. Because once the movie stops and you walk out of the theater, then the real life begins. So whatever happened in the movie is a pleasure or distress that you derive due to identification. Identification with what? Identification with a certain character in the movie. So like that, all of material life is based on identification with the body, based on identification with the body. Therefore, whatever pleasures we experience here are pleasures born out of identification. That is why it is said that it is unreal. Unreal in the sense that whatever you're experiencing in the movie theater is real, but unreal in the sense that it's not really happening to you. Although you're experiencing it, it's really not happening to you. That's what it means. So like that, because of you're basically going through sensations of happiness and distress due to identification. That is called material life. Material life is a life of identification. Spiritual life means actual life. You are actually experiencing. The soul directly experiences. That is why Prabhupada writes that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the transcendental urge of the soul. So when we read the Bhagavatam, when we discuss the Bhagavatam, the pleasure that we derive from reading the Bhagavatam and discussing the Bhagavatam is a pleasure that the soul perceives, the soul experiences. Whereas material pleasures and pains and pleasures is a pleasure of identification. The soul is experiencing what, but not an intrinsic pleasure. It's a pleasure of identification that the soul is experiencing. Now, Prabhupada, in one lecture, he explains that without distress, one cannot feel happiness. In the material world. That's a very interesting concept. If it is not the other way around, it's not that without happiness, one cannot feel distress. In fact, Prabhupada says, happiness in the material world is dependent on distress. What does it mean, dependent on distress? Something very important for us to understand. Because the moment we leave the spiritual world and we are here in this material world, it is an unnatural environment for us. It is an unnatural environment for us. And just like water and oil cannot mix. Water and oil cannot mix. They're two separate things. So spirit and matter, they're two separate things. They cannot mix. Intrinsically, they cannot mix. They're two separate things. They can only be together, but they cannot be, what do you call it? Like in chemistry, you have two elements you join together, they form a certain compound. It's not like that. Here, both are just linked together. That's it. They don't form some other compound and all that. It's just this, the body and the soul are linked together, and together they're performing some activity. Just like Prabhupada gives the example of a driver in a car. Krishna himself says this. Yantra rudani mayaya, that it's like a driver in a car. It's not that the driver and the car have mixed together and formed some entity called, what do you call it? Dry car or something. It's not like driver, the car, I mean, whatever. It's just not like some third entity. They're two separate entities. They don't mix together, but they are, one is seated on the other, like the yantra rudani maya, like that. So then the question comes up, like, for example, okay, what does this concept of seated on a machine mean? For example, let's say a virtual reality machine. Okay, today we have what's called the virtual reality machine, where you can put on a virtual reality glass and then experience a world of virtual reality. In fact, Mark Zuckerberg has introduced his Meta, which is all about virtual reality. So where they put on some glasses and try to identify with whatever is going on within this thing. So because matter and soul, spirit are different, spirit cannot derive any pleasure from matter. By definition, it cannot derive any pleasure from matter. They're two separate entities. How can they derive matter? I mean, spirit is a different substance, matter is a different substance. So spirit cannot derive any pleasure from matter. So what happens? Spirit has to forget itself and identify with matter. Spirit has to identify with matter. And once the spirit identifies with matter, then what happens is that, just like I gave the example, you have to identify with the character in the movie. You have to forget yourself for a minute. I think that's what happens to several of us who watch movie. We forget ourselves, right? We get so much absorbed in the movie and the plot, we forget ourselves. So we have to forget ourselves and identify with what is going on, or with the virtual reality, whatever is going on there. So for the spirit soul, there is no such thing as distress. Spirit soul is only blissful, all that. Satchidananda Vigraha. It is an entity which is always blissful. There's no such thing as a distress for the soul. So what happens in material life is that when that identification happens, so it cannot derive any pleasure from matter. Soul cannot derive any pleasure from matter. So then what happens? There is a sense of distress that has to be created, and only when the sense of distress is created, the relief from that distress is what is called happiness. That's it. There's no other happiness that the soul can experience. That's it. The soul has only one kind of happiness that it can experience, which is the happiness of the spirit soul. So to experience any other kind of happiness, what do? You have to create some unnatural situation and then remove that unnatural situation and bring you back to a original situation. That's all. That's all. So that is what is happening here. The material life means you'll be put into an unnatural situation, and when the unnatural situation is removed, then you feel happy. What is an unnatural situation? Unnatural situation is a situation of distress, so-called distress. So because Prabhupada explains that material life, material happiness means absence of distress. That's it. That's all is called material happiness. How do we understand this? For example, let's say food. Okay, when we eat food, so unless there is an urge to eat food, you don't feel happy eating food, right? Because let's say we are full, the same whatever food that we like, the pizza or whatever we like, suddenly it becomes distasteful. No, 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 I don't want it. So unless there is an urge to eat, you don't feel that pleasure of eating. What is that urge? It's distress, right? There's a pang, it's called the hunger pangs. So unless that pang is there and you relieve that pang, you don't feel happy. But once you relieve the pang, the same food which gave you happiness not giving you happiness. So unless we're put into a situation of distress and removed from that distress, that removal from distress is called happiness. The example that the scriptures give is just like a criminal is sometimes in the ancient days, they would throw a criminal into the water and make him think he's almost going to die, and they pull him up for a few seconds. When he's pulled up for a few seconds, he feels relief. That relief is taken as happiness. So because the soul has no other, there's no other way, there's no alternate way of experiencing for the soul. Soul has only one way of experiencing, which is Sachidananda in relationship with Krishna. There's no other concept of happiness for the soul. And coming to the material world is an unnatural situation. So when that unnatural situation, the soul cannot relate to anything here in this material world. So to give it a sense of happiness, right? That's what the spirit soul is. The spirit soul is looking for, right? Happiness independent of Krishna. How do you get that happiness independent of Krishna? That happiness can be independent of Krishna can only be derived when there is a sense of false distress. That's also not real distress, because souls cannot experience real distress also. There's a false distress which is created, and when that false distress is removed, then you feel some false happiness. That's it. False in the sense, I'm just saying false in the sense that it's not real, as in it's not affecting the soul directly. It is a pleasure that is coming from identification. It is not false like the way the Mayavadis talk about. According to them, the false does not even exist. That is not the false in which I'm talking about. False in the sense that it's not really happening to you. You're only identifying with it. So, for the living entity is steeped in this sense of identification of in this material identification. Therefore, everything works on the principle of duality. When it is summer, cold water seems very good. When it's winter, cold water seems distressful. Then you have warm water. So everything hot, cold, all this are all operational principles of the material world for someone whose consciousness is steeped with the sense of material enjoyment. But the moment one zooms out of it and think, what is this? Something is going on in a movie. What have I got to do with it? Then you become indifferent to dualities. That is the meaning. Although, analogies have limitations. What does it mean to plug out of a movie and just watch a movie? It doesn't make sense, but I think you get the sense of it, right? That once you plug out of the virtual reality machine, then if you have an opportunity to look at what happened there, it's just something superficial. Dualities are all elements of that virtual reality experience. It's got nothing to do with you would think, right? So like that, the soul has got nothing to do with all these dualities in this material world. So like that, Krishna and the pure devotees, not just Krishna, but Krishna and his pure devotees, the eternal associates of the Lord, they've got nothing to do with the dualities of this material world. But because our consciousness is steeped in material enjoyment, therefore, even when we look at Krishna, or when we look at eternal associates of the Lord like Srila Prabhupada, we look at them in terms of our conceptions of duality. We look at them in with the lens of the lens of our experience of duality. For example, when Krishna, this pastime is the Shalva, when he beheads the false Vasudeva, suddenly Krishna becomes bewildered. Krishna, the supreme personality of God, the omniscient Lord, is getting bewildered when he doesn't know. The idea is that, as Prabhupada is mentioning here in the beginning, that of the purport, that Krishna behaves as if he's like one of us. He behaves like as if he's one of us. That does not mean he's one of us. Similarly, Srila Prabhupada, He also behaves like as if he's one of us, but he's not one of us. He is definitely not one of us. So they are completely free from the concepts of duality. They are fixed in understanding what is real and what is unreal. Unreal in the sense that these have got nothing to do with the spirit soul. They are fixed in that conception. So this there is no such thing as bad and good for the Lord. So when the Lord steals, it is not from our mundane perception. It is a perception of duality. Oh, the Lord is stealing. Makanchor. Why is he stealing? But for Krishna, there's no such duality. He's not affected by a consciousness of material consciousness. Whatever he's doing is absolute. So the solution is that we should cure our heart from this bhavaroga, the consciousness of material enjoyment. And when we look at Krishna's pastimes, when you look at the pastimes of the eternal associate, the Lord, we should look at them not through our eyes, but through scripture. When we begin to look through scripture, what happens, as Prabhupada says, when we practice bhakti, through things happen. We begin to understand what is Krishna. We begin to develop an attraction for Krishna, and our fever for material enjoyment decreases. So our conceptions of duality begin to slowly diminish. So that is very, very important, that we probably say this is the test. As we advance in Krishna consciousness, we should be able to develop our attraction for Krishna, and our sense of duality should start diminishing. We should come to the platform of Pandita Samadarshanaha. Pandita Samadarshanaha does not mean that you treat everyone equally. You can't treat a human being and a tiger in the same way. Human being has to be treated in a certain way. Tiger has to be treated in a certain way. But Pandita Samadarshana means that they see all of them equally. Seeing all of them equally does not mean treating also all of them in the same way. You treat them appropriately according to the laws of how the material world works. Like a tiger has to be treated in a certain way, human beings are treated in a certain way, that's okay. But when we look at it, we are looking in terms of human beings higher than the tiger. But when Prabhupada looks at everybody is equal. Everybody is equal. There's no question of we are higher than the animals, and everybody is equal. That is the concept of reality. That is what reality is. That is how a pure devotee looks at it. So we should come to that platform by practice of Krishna consciousness. As we advance, we'll see that our attraction for Krishna is increasing. At the same time, our ideas of duality are diminishing. We are beginning to more and more see how everything is, how Krishna is seated in everyone's heart, and every living entity is equal, although their bodies are different. It's only their bodies which are different, but actually all the living entities are exactly equal to all other living entities. So the concept of duality, high-low, begins to vanish. So these are some thoughts which I wanted to share today. And okay, I mean, concluding thoughts. So when we read a purport like what we read, the previous purport, we should not think that Prabhupada was influenced by a certain culture in which he grew up. Prabhupada is influenced by this, Prabhupada is influenced by that, therefore he wrote a purport like this. Those are extremely unintelligent, uneducated arguments, uneducated assertions. Intelligence means to understand. Prabhupada is a pure devotee, internal associate of the Lord. And this is a Bhagavatam purport. This is a Bhagavatam purport. So it is not dated. This is applicable at all times, place, and circumstances. So we need to, first of all, when we read Prabhupada's books, we should be confident of the fact these are presentations of the eternal associates of the Lord. They are transcendently perfect. They're eternal. We need to understand that fact and accept those things. If we don't accept them, then we will not be able to even understand it. First of all, we accept. Then we will be able to understand how it is true. If we don't even accept them, thinking that the times that we are living is politically incorrect, maybe Prabhupada is affected by the education that he was brought up in, the shortest churches college. I mean, these kind of arguments have been posed by different devotees. That's why I'm bringing it up. So they are not affected by all these dualities. They're not affected by anything in this material world of this is good, this is high, this is low. So when Prabhupada says men have to do this, women have to do this, it's not because he's affected by the concepts of duality and oppression and patriarchy and all that. He is just talking eternal Vedic principles that are beneficial for everyone concerned. Okay. So if there are any comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for the wonderful class. Very enlightening and very you definitely did shed some light on this difficult topic. I just wanted to make a comment that a couple weeks back we were studying the prayers of Queen Kunti, and I was asked to give class, and it was about that famous purport of Vama Swabhava. And I was thinking, what am I going to do? So I'm like, let me go on YouTube and try to find some class. And I found your class about Vama Swabhava. And you elucidated it so nice. So somehow you always get maybe the politically incorrect purports, but it's very very nice, Prabhu. We'd just like to open it up. If anybody has questions, they may raise their hand, or if anybody has questions on the YouTube, please type it on the chat, and we will relay it to the speaker. I see Shrestha Mataji has raised her hand. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. It is such a pleasure to see you here giving a class to our Columbus community. I'm very, very happy. Before I ask my question, I would like to add that Her Grace Shiromani Devidasi and Prabhu have been my Shiksha Guru ever since I was doing my bachelor's degree in VIT in India. They were the ones who gave me the initial training for preaching and the taste for preaching to youth and the college students. So I'm really happy that you could give a class to us. For my question, I would like to go back to the controversial topic and ask, I just wanted to know, how do we train women in ISKCON to be shy as well as brave and outgoing in preaching? How do we train to balance the two aspects?
You have to train women, first of all, in Krishna consciousness properly, because Krishna consciousness includes everything. It is not that training in shyness is something separate and all that. The Krishna conscious training, if we focus on it, automatically, unless we train wrongly, then something like when we say Prabhupada's books, right? What does it mean? It means everything. It's not that, okay, only some elements are important, other elements are not important. When we say Prabhupada's books, all of it is important. So the focus should be on Krishna conscious training. And when that happens, see, everything that Prabhupada has mentioned has got a certain relevance. For example, this particular purport where he speaks about shyness. Now, as I mentioned, it is not easy for a woman who is brought up in a co-educational system in a modern civilization to exhibit some shyness. It just can't happen. It's just not going to happen also. So to expect, so if someone comes to the Krishna conscious movement and we start judging women, okay, this woman is not shy, she's not following Prabhupada's teaching. Doesn't make any sense, because this is not how Prabhupada taught us to look at things. Because we have to understand the whole context of their upbringing. We have to see so many different things. Like Prabhupada, that's the reason that during Prabhupada's time, everybody is attracted to men, women, all of them. Why? Because Prabhupada took them as they are, So, and from whatever platform they were, he encouraged them to be Krishna conscious. So this opportunity to train women can come only if we have a particular setup. For example, if the girls are being taught, like for example, in Mayapur, you have places where the girls are taught like that. If they have an atmosphere to grow up like that, where there are no association of men, then it's natural that these qualities will manifest. But otherwise, you really can't expect it to happen. You can't send them to a secular school with all the other children and tell the girl, you have to be shy. What sense does it make? It just doesn't make any sense. It's just impractical. It's just fanatic application of Krishna consciousness. You can only do your best. You can just bring up the glory, the advantages and disadvantages and all that. But then you really can't do much. So it's the responsibility of those who are training to provide the environment also, not just fanatically push some teaching from push something from Prabhupada's books and say this is what it is and it should happen. What are the conditions in which it can happen also needs to be fulfilled. Is it okay?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. I see Alec Prabhu has a question.
Sure.
Hare Krishna, Achintya, Chaitanya Prabhu for such wonderful class and their answer to the previous question. really gave goosebumps during your class. So really appreciate that. So Prabhuji, I have a question. I think it's the the contrary to what Shrestha asked earlier about training women in ISKCON. I was wondering that how do we train Prabhujis in ISKCON about the same subject matters, because sometimes these things are taken just literally, and you were just now mentioning about how fanatically applying these words from Prabhupada, and sometimes even in ISKCON we see that I mean, in ISKCON we are supposed to elevate our consciousness. We are supposed to not see at the bodily platform, and we are supposed to go above and beyond. And sometimes, very subtly things happen which doesn't let that happen to elevate our consciousness. Like, for example, we were there in Mayapur a couple of weeks ago, and that was the first time for me. So it was just out of the world experience. Sorry, Prabhuji, I didn't.
couldn't hear you.
The bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
would have been great to meet.
Yeah, but next time for sure. We had a very tight, like packed schedule, but yeah, definitely we'll meet next time. But so I was observing, some of the things over there, and I mean, nothing bothered me, but I was just thinking that subtly these gives some messages which are contrary to our understanding of seeing beyond the body. So, like, for example, in Nursing Aarti, all the Matajis are at the back in the morning, and like it then during offering the lamp, and the first it goes to Prabhuji, then so all these, like, subtle not discrimination, but like just preferences given that okay, Prabhuji's, you sit here, Mataji's, you go to that room, and run here, run there, you can't come near. I mean, in that I saw one experience where one Mataji was in the middle, in front during Narsingha Aarti, and she was pushed out, and there was quite a fuss at that time. But I was telling Shrestha also, so how do we as devotees, and especially as Prabhujis, also overcome to this idea of not seeing just at the bodily platform, and at the same time practice our rules in spiritual life without noticing these things too much.
We have to do things as much as possible in the best possible manner. Like, for example, in Mayapur, you have for both Panchatattva and for Radhamma, we have separate men and women sections. But for Narasimha, you know that it's a very limited area, right? So then, how do we manage such a situation? If we manage by the principle of standard Vedic, so standard hierarchy, even in Krishna consciousness, right? I mean, the sannyasis are considered the leaders of society, right? They're the topmost. So you give them the preference. That's just Vedic culture, You just don't. You give them the highest respect and whatever the culture is like that. So therefore, it is not very what do you call it? First of all, for a singer, to stand in front of Narasimhadev and a group of people around him, where is the place for a woman to be somewhere in between that? So there are some things which we have to see according to the circumstances, and there we have to apply things like, for example, darshan does not mean that we are going to see the Lord. In fact, it means that the Lord is going to see us. Specifically, it means like how you go and report to your boss, right? If you're working somewhere, you go and report to your boss. So it is like reporting to the boss. Say, I'm here. I mean, I'm reporting to you. So for that reporting, the Lord, as long as you come for the Arati, you can still get the same benefit, whether you stand in the front or back or wherever. It's the same, exactly the same benefit. Depends on our consciousness. So wherever possible, we can try to provide that. For example, Prabhupada, I remember in India, I was reading in India when there was a program, Pandal program in the evening, and it was getting night, right? So there, it's not the sannyasis are supposed to go first there. Obviously, the women have to go first in the carts. They have to be sent home first. So there they get a priority. So we have to see this context and time and place and circumstances. So there, Prabhupada, all his women disciples, he sent them first back home in the carts. Finally, all the sannyasis came. So whereas here it's the reverse, because that's generally the etiquette. Yes, I mean, the sannyasis are supposed to be offering, what is it? I mean, supposed to be, what is it, in front leading the Lord. I mean, as part of the Vedic culture, that's, as the leaders are supposed to be right in the front. That's the Vedic etiquette. Is it okay?
Yes, Prabhuji. Definitely. I mean, there are certain ways Vedic culture has been there, and I don't know. Sometimes I feel that some things are like over the time. Some things they stay applicable, and some things like they transform a little bit. Sometimes some leadership roles given, but of course we have Vedic culture also that we follow. So it's just hard, I'm sure it will come with experience and more.
I'll give you I'll ask you a question. Okay, suppose there were to be a proper disciple and there were to be you. Okay, and I'm sure you would not say that a proper disciple and you should stand together in front of Narasimhadev, right? You don't do that. Why? If there is a place only for one, why? Because of the fact that there acknowledged superiority, right? Because of that, I mean, as a matter of etiquette, we don't think about this twice, right? Same way, certain things are like that. But if it is done with the idea, that somebody is inferior, somebody is lower, that is what causes the problem, right? It causes the problem. It is not the following of etiquette which is the problem, but it is the consciousness with which the etiquette is being imposed upon. That is where the problem is, not the etiquette by itself.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I have a question. Can I ask?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, my name is Naveen Krishnadas. Thank you very much. Sorry I joined a little late. Yeah, it's extension of Alak Prabhu's question about the Prabhupada mode understanding as literal, sometimes taken as a poetic way, or sometimes colloquial way or contextual based. So to form a question, I just want to give a couple of examples so you understand where I'm coming from. So Prabhupada, he's the pure devotee, we know that he's Acharya, but his physical body comes from Bengal, so naturally he has a Bengal accent when he speaks. So when some of the Prabhupada followers who wants to follow out of love, which is great, but they take literally. For example, Prabhupada used jog instead of yoga, because in Bengal, they use the word Vrindavan, and then Yadava, Jadava, and then like different. Like I come from South India, where the Sanskrit is pronounced a little bit different. Like Egna means we don't say Egya, we say Egna, G-N-A. So it's a distinction. And then now Prabhupada also himself, Ejya Jatri says that he never said Jejya Jatri. He still said Egya. Sometimes you use that, sometimes you use this. And then now, having said that, now sometimes people derive the formula from here. Prabhupada said this is how it is, we have to say it. And then when somebody comes from different culture back and they say, no, Prabhupada said that, but because of the so and so context, but there's not literal meaning. In that context, we can take different meaning. Another place, some principles of Prabhupada said, that's it. There's nothing to change. But in general, as the time passes, this can be diluted eventually, and then people can do whatever they want, whenever they want. And I think Prabhupada said this, no, Prabhupada said this. There's always two school of thoughts. So do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, see, the first principle of following Prabhupada means to read all his books first. See, the problem happens when we try to understand the book from his life. Rather, we should do the exact opposite. We should try to understand his life from his books. That is a fundamental thing. Otherwise, there's a big problem, because people will say Prabhupada did this, Prabhupada did that. But then, first of all, have we read all the books? If we read all the books, we'll find that whatever he did and spoke was consistent with what he wrote. That's why in one letter, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I think, he wrote a letter to what is his name? Prana Prabhu, where he writes that where Prabhupada, he did not want all his transcriptions of talks, of conversations and others to be published. Because Prabhupada said, there's not that you'll get some new understanding from that. Or everything that I wanted to say, I've already said in my books. So the problem occurs, first of all, when we don't read. The second problem occurs when I mean, that's the first thing to do is to read all the books. Now, after reading all the books, the most important thing is we should not falsify anything that Prabhupada wrote. So, for example, he may write in one place that okay, he may write something about women in one place, and he may write something about women in some other place. For example, you have the example of Govinda Dasi, then you have the example of this purport. So the point is we have to accept everything that Prabhupada said. We cannot just say this is the correct understanding. That is not the correct understanding. So everything that Prabhupada did has to be accepted, and whatever presentations that a person makes has to show whatever Prabhupada said and done was all correct. We cannot say that this was wrong, that is right. Now, as far as pronunciations are concerned, that is a detail which Prabhupada really didn't bother much about. Of course, Prabhupada wanted us to learn Sanskrit to pronounce Sanskrit properly. But those are, I don't know, those are not matters of teachings or, I don't know, judgments, right? When Prabhupada presents a certain conclusion, that's not dependent on how he pronounces something. We are more concerned about those elements of it. What are his teachings? Are his teachings influenced by anything? No. That's where the question comes. Are the teachings influenced by anything mundane? No. They're purely transcendental. That is all elements of his teaching. That's very important. Not that some elements of his teaching are transcendental, some are mundane. All of them are transcendental, because Bhagavatam itself deals with all kinds of topics, deals about material world, creation, everything it deals about. So whatever the Bhagavatam deals with, Prabhupada also gives purports on that too. Whatever he has given, those teachings are, perfect. But Prabhupada himself said, in terms of, sometimes he would forget a verse, or sometimes he would mispronounce a particular word, or sometimes with a certain accent he would say. Those kind of things are not to be taken seriously, because they're not matters of judgments or conclusions, right?
Yeah, that's correct, Prabhu. Yeah, when somebody takes it, that's a problem. The point is that somebody said like this, you have to say same thing like that. So that's a problem. Yeah.
Prabhupada used the word devotees, but devotees is not the correct way to pronounce it. It's called it's devotees, not devotees. So there are so many things they're like that. Whatever a person prefers, it's fine. But if you're going to give a talk in a university and say devotees, that doesn't make sense in a university lecture if you go and say devotees. You have to say devotees, because that's how they're, I don't know how many people even know the word devotee, even in academia. So, or even devotee. But anyway, the point is, depending on the audience. So when you're talking to an ISKCON audience, it doesn't matter whether we say devotee, it doesn't matter. But where it matters, we have to do the right thing.
Correct. Thank you, bro. I think that's my understanding is that also, because I was just taking Alek Prabhu's question to next level, saying that, yeah, when to take literally, when not to take literally, there is some leverage if you come from the social perspective or culture perspective. But if you come to spiritual perspective or principle perspective, which is universal, there is nothing. We just accept as it is.
Yeah, like for example, I'm also from South India. You go to a Sri Vaishnava temple and pronounce the way you're talking about, they'll think, which planet are you from? Unless you're a great personality, unless you're a great, they'll accept you're a great personality, because that's a Vedic tradition, right? When a great personality does these things, that's okay. But we cannot go and do that. Then they'll think there's something wrong with us. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you, bro.
Hare Krishna. Are there any other questions? If not, I have a personal question myself, in that I was actually thinking about the secondary purport that you were elaborating on the point of duality, on looking at on how we're looking at duality. But I hear like sometimes that it's kind of bewildering to me personally that when I hear that the Uttam Adhikari is not able to discriminate, because he sees like everybody as a devotee, and he's like kind of someone like Nityananda Prabhu, he sees everyone as a devotee. And but in our personal life, at least in my personal life, I can see that if I don't discriminate between what is, like, as some devotees name something as Maya and something as Krishna, or as something that can be dovetailed in Krishna consciousness, like for example, like if like the bar versus the temple. Well, it's very easy to decipher which is more conducive to Krishna consciousness. But for a pure devotee, it's he can practice Krishna consciousness anywhere. But I'm just trying to understand when and where can we use our power of discrimination. Is it when we're still identifying with this material body and we need to see, and we're still in that sadhaka stage, we still need to discriminate, and then once we get to the higher stage, then everything is in relation to Krishna. So I'm trying to understand that a little bit more.
No, first of all, Uttamadhikari does not mean that he has lost a sense of discrimination. He knows what is right, what is wrong. He knows what is dharma. That is the definition of an Uttamadhikari, right? That he knows Shastric principles thoroughly. That's one of the definitions of Uttamadhikari, that he knows, he's very well, he's an expert in the scriptures. So he can clearly see what is right, what is wrong. That is different from saying, but that does not mean the person who's committing the sin is lesser than me. That is how they are thinking. Because ultimately we're all associates of the Lord. We come down to this material world to enjoy whatever, So, but there's a difference between discriminating between what is right and wrong. They know this is wrong, but that does not mean the person who is committing the wrong, that's how they look at it, is more elevated, is that I am more elevated than that person. So in terms of when they look at hierarchically, they're only talking in terms, okay, I am the lowest, that's it. Not that they cannot understand that this is right, this is wrong. They know, definitely they know. This is right, this is wrong. But that person is committing some temporarily, he's doing this thing, but he can take to Krishna consciousness and go back to Godhead. He knows that. So it's not that they lose a sense of discrimination. No, they have the sharpest sense of discrimination. They have the best sense of discrimination.
It seems to be along the lines of another bewildering statement by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's saying that when the residents of Kuliagram, they're coming every year to ask him what is the definition of a Vaishnava. He says in the first definition of he says is that anybody who chants Hare Krishna once is a devotee. So I've always kind of thought that like we were doing Harinam with Mahavishnu Swami in New York City, and we just go and tell people, can you say Hare Krishna? Like, do we have to treat them as a devotee based on that statement?
Good point. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that chanting once refers to chanting once offenselessly. At least once, if you chant offenselessly, I consider it to be. That's how Bhaktivinoda Thakur clarifies it. But in any case, nectar of devotion nectar of instruction gives us the criteria, right? You're supposed to offer obeisances to a person who's initiated. So, when it says, what is it? Even the person who's chanted once, it means one is chanted once offenselessly. That's what it means. But at the same time, Lord Chaitanya speaks about Asat Sanga Tyaga, and because even bhakti is of many kinds. Like in India, for example, you have hundreds and thousands and millions of Krishna bhaktas, right? What have we got to do with them? Nothing, actually. Nothing, literally nothing. Because they're all Sakama bhaktas. Our process is completely different. Baladev Vidyabhushan says that, just like in the Himalayas, suppose you suddenly see a golden mountain, right? That golden mountain is different from all other mountains. Women who are in this group will know. Men may find it still difficult. Okay, it's just a different kind of mountain. But women will clearly understand that the golden mountain is different from all other kinds of mountains, right? So like the pure, Baladev Vidyabhushan gives the example. I think that similarly, pure devotion service is separate from everything else. So when we say devotee, we are specifically referring to someone who's taken to the process of pure devotion service. That is why it's important to understand when he said chant Hare Krishna once, it refers to chanting Hare Krishna once offenselessly. Because the consideration of offense comes only in the practice of pure bhakti. It does not come otherwise. There are so many people who are chanting Hare Krishna. They're all devotees. They're Sakama devotees, but that's not the kind of devotees that we are talking about. The Lord Chaitanya is talking about. At the same time, because they've chanted Hare Krishna, definitely it is going to give them that that sukriti, due to which they will get further chants. That's a process, right? We are trying to make the whole world fortunate. We're giving them an opportunity that even if they don't take up by hearing our chanting, still they are benefited.
One more follow-up point. I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit over time.
I don't know about the others, though. I have time.
Okay. Yeah. This come back to the first point about seeing things right versus wrong. The devotee, you're saying that the Uttamadhikari can can understand what is right and wrong, but he may act, he may think that even those who are sinning, they're higher than me, but he knows what is right and wrong. And then so this question comes up of dovetailing, it's like, when do we know, because there's this yukta vairagya, we have this line of yukta vairagya. So but if we can, what is the principle of yukta vairagya, and how can it be used in Krishna's service? So we see like many devotees, like many people, they buy like very big cars and very big houses. And so is yukta vairagya using it all just for, everything must be 100% used for Krishna's service? Or is it that we understand we have some material desires, and then we dovetail it? So there's two different things that I think about, is that we're using something, like if I go and buy like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or one of those high-priced cars, I say that I have some material desires and I'll use it for Krishna's service. Or I get a nice house or something, and I say 10% that's going to be used for Krishna's service. I'm trying to understand that.
Okay. See, for this, you need to understand that dovetailing, first of all, is a preliminary platform of devotional service. It's a preliminary platform. Like, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, if you study the Bhagavad Gita, you'll notice that Prabhupada calls Karma Yoga action in Krishna consciousness. Okay. Then is there no difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga then? Both of them are Krishna consciousness. But Bhakti Yoga is a higher platform than Karma Yoga. What is the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga? In Karma Yoga, you have specific material desires and inclinations. You're engaging that, results of that in the service of the Lord. That's called Karma Yoga. But Bhakti Yoga means you're doing whatever the Lord wants, not according to your desire and according to your nature and things like that. When we say our desire and our nature, it refers to our psychophysical condition and our desires and things like that. That is called dovetailing. The other one is called, the higher level of Krishna consciousness is the Bhakti Yoga level, technically speaking, is where you're doing whatever the Lord wants, not what you want, right? It may be what, according to your nature, it may not be. Like, for example, Prabhupada, once Jayapataka Maharaj wrote to Prabhupada saying, I like to be in Mayapur, I like to do all these things. So Prabhupada wrote back to him saying, you're very fortunate because the service that I have given to you is also what you like, right? But it's not that that's true with everybody. We may be doing something because we like to do it now, or because our psychophysical nature is like this. But eventually we should come to a platform that we should do whatever is necessary for the service of the Lord, whether it's our psychophysical nature or not. That is the platform of Bhakti Yoga, technically speaking. But all of them are Krishna consciousness. So we have to progress ourselves. We have to progress in that path. That's one thing which is very important for us to know. So there's level 1, then there's level 2 of Krishna consciousness. Level 1 Krishna consciousness is dovetailing. Level 2 is you do whatever is necessary for the service of the Lord. And now this specific question about dovetailing, that is also important. There are two different. Bhakti Yoga is one thing, and then Karma Yoga level is another thing. Karma Yoga means, okay, let me not use the word Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga because sometimes people can get confused with it. The preliminary level of Krishna consciousness is different. Higher level of Krishna consciousness is different. In the higher level of Krishna consciousness, where you're actually practicing Yukta Vairagya, because Yukta Vairagya's definition is Anasakta Vishayan Yatarum Upayundate. Anasakta Vishayan, when you're without Anasakta means without attachment, you're engaging the objects, Anasakta Vishayan, objects of material life in the service of the Lord. Yatarum Upayundate. This Anasakta Vishayan is actually happens at the higher level of Krishna consciousness. In the preliminary level of dovetailing, you're only purifying your material desires. It's not technically Yukta Vairagya. It's a preparation for Yukta Vairagya. You understood, right? That's the difference.
It's kind of like mixed devotional service. It's mixed devotional service.
No, it's not mixed. It's not mixed. But okay. Mixed is a different concept altogether. Mixed means, okay, that is another thing which you need to understand. There's a difference between mixed devotional service and pure devotional service. What is the difference between mixed and pure? Pure means, okay, I understand that I have these material desires, but I want to get rid of these desires and be engaged purely in the service of the Lord. But at this point in time, I'm not able to do it. But I know this is my goal, and I'm going to work towards that goal. And so even though I have a material desire, I'm trying to purify it with the idea that I want to one day come to this platform of only doing whatever pleases the Lord. That's it. Not just trying to dovetail. I want to give up the stage at some point. Right now I cannot, but I want to do it. So that is called pure. That is still considered pure devotional service. That is still considered pure devotional service. What is not pure devotional service is that I have to attain pure love of God, but I have to be practical. I can also pursue this. I can also pursue this. It's like that Ekeha Kurunandana is not there in the mind. You're thinking that this is also fine. This is also fine. This is also. We should think this is not fine. This is not fine. That is what differentiates. This is not fine. But I'm presently in the situation. Therefore, this is the best for me to do now. Understood, right? Like, for example, drugs. Okay. Like when people take drugs, how do they come out of that addiction? They don't instantly just jump out of it, right? They reduce the dosage and things like that, right? That is the process of pure bhakti. That the idea is I want to get out of this addiction business. That understanding that, look, I have this psychophysical nature, I have these material desires. I want to get out of it. That desire should be there. Not that it's okay. That consciousness that I want to attain pure love, I want to get out of this. But right now I cannot. What do I do? So I'm doing this so that I get out of it. Purifying it to get out of it. That is called pure bhakti. But the moment we think that a material desire is okay, we are finished. That is called mixed bhakti. Material desire is not okay. But that is my condition. Just like a doctor will not blame a sick patient. Okay, if a sick patient thinks, I'm okay, then the doctor will say, how are you going to cure yourself if you think you're okay? First of all, think you're not okay. Only then you'll take the process seriously, the medicines and the diet, and you'll cure yourself. So that attitude of thinking it is okay is what is called mixed bhakti. But the problem is not material desire. How we handle the material desire is the problem. You understood, right? If the material desire is handled with I'm not able to get rid of this at this point in time. But I want to purify myself. I will dovetail it. Just like Kardama Muni, when the Supreme Lord is personally present, he says the Lord that I still have this desire. But Supreme Lord himself appears in the womb of Devotee. So the attitude is very important. That's why Prabhupada repeatedly says in his lectures, especially in the Nectar of Instruction, he writes, advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude. So the attitude is material desire is not okay, but I have material desire. So I'll purify it. I want to get out of it. But the moment we think, okay, material desire is okay, then they're finished. That's the difference.
That clarifies it so much. So dovetailing is coming in the like Prabhupada gives a famous example. Someone asks Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I'm addicted to drinking wine. And then so Prabhupada said, while you're drinking the wine, think of Krishna and think that Krishna is 1,000 times the taste of this wine. So according to that definition, because he knows that this is bad and it is a material conception, and he wants to get to devotional service, it's still coming under the auspices of pure devotional service.
That's correct. That is why Prabhupada writes in the 31st verse of the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. If you look at the purport, he ends by saying, in the beginning stage of Krishna consciousness, one may not be able to practice properly, but one should go on without the sense of defeat or hopelessness. He says that very clearly. He writes, one should not be overcome by one should not become depressed and all these things. One should go on without the sense of defeat or hopelessness. One should progress. The idea is material desires are not the problem. The attitude towards the material desire is the problem. So technically, the Yukta Vairagya begins at when you're already unattached. Like when Prabhupada is engaging something in Krishna's service, that's called Yukta Vairagya. So when elevated devotees are doing it, that's called Yukta Vairagya. Because they're not doing it because of their attachment. Whereas engaging what you're attached in service of the Lord is on the way to Yukta Vairagya. It is going to purify your desires. Take for example the Pandavas, okay? They are the classic example of Yukta Vairagya. Pandavas, they fought their whole life, whatever they went through, their whole life was to get that kingdom, right? And what happens in the moment they get the kingdom? Very shortly thereafter, Krishna leaves the planet, they also leave. So that means they were not attached to it. They were not attached to it because Krishna says, I want you to do it. They did it. That is called Yukta Vairagya. They were emperors. Emperor is I mean, that's just, it's a mundane thing, like ruling the world. But because they were not doing it because of their own particular desire, because the Lord wanted it, they did it. That is called Yukta Vairagya, where you're actually doing it in an unattached manner. Otherwise, it's not technically Yukta Vairagya, but it's on the path of Yukta Vairagya.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. Yeah, go ahead.
So you were saying, so I'm just trying to clarify in my mind, Yukta Vairagya is on the basis of Krishna consciousness. That means there's no attachment or desire for yourself. You're doing it just for Krishna. Then there's the level of pure devotional service where you understand that you're materially attached, but you know that Krishna consciousness is the real thing. So you're trying to get rid of them. That is still under the auspices of Krishna consciousness. And then material mixed devotional service is that you're making justifications that, okay, I'm doing bhakti, but I can have all these desires as well.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
It's like the seventh offense of the holy name, right? To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy names, almost like that.
That's not sinful activity, no?
Okay.
You can say material attachment despite understanding so many instructions on subject matter.
Oh,
that offense, yeah. No, well, I'll tell you one funny story. Jayadvaita Maharaj once came to Bangalore when I was living there. I had a god brother of mine. So he asked Maharaj, I want to build a big house so that I can serve devotees. What do you think about it? And imagine asking that question to Jayadvaita Maharaj. So, Maharaj asked him, what is it? How many days in a year are you going to host devotees? Then he thought about it. Actually, he has so many rooms, all those things. I think he said one room. I think he's building a big house. I think 1 room or 2 rooms, something he said. And then he had so many days. Then he was thinking about how often devotees come and all those things. Okay. And finally he said maybe about 60 days in a year. And he said for 60 days in a year, and this thing, what is it? With whatever, the small quantity of space that he had allocated for devotees. And he was saying that this, you're doing it for Krishna? I mean, how do you justify you're doing this for Krishna? Why did he say I have a material desire? I will also try to serve devotees in the process of, he said, because if it is for Krishna, then practically you should be having 365 days somebody in your house. Should be feeding them, and you should give, you should have not just one small room in your big palace. You should have much more than that, something like that. So there are some objective parameters also to judge.
That answers my question, Prabhu. Thank you so much. That clarifies a lot. Thank you. Does anybody else have any other final questions or comments? Guru Dayal Prabhu?
No, I have no any question. I just, I think Shiromani Mataji also in the line in Zoom. So I just humble request if possible one day also Mataji can assist in Columbus devotee for another, any Saturday class. It will be very great and appreciated for get mercy from Mataji.
Okay, I'll tell you something about Shiromani, okay, since you asked that question. So she was brought up in the Middle East, where she was supposed to be headed to America to do a post-graduation in medicine and all those things. But then she encountered Prabhupada's books and then decided to stay back in India and all those things. But she was someone who never had entered the kitchen in her life. She didn't know what happens in a kitchen, and so many other things. So it was all very first time that she ever heard in Prabhupada's book, the woman is supposed to be submissive to her husband and all those things. Now, why I'm saying all this is, all that is a fact. But however, although her upbringing is like that, she has so far not given a class where the audience is mixed, where you have both men and women. Like when in Mayapur, when they ask her to give Bhagavatam class, she says, no, I can give to a class of ladies, but I can't give a class to when there is a mixed audience. So Gurudeva Prabhu, I'll convey your invitation to her, and if she takes it up, it will be definitely the historical first, where she's addressing both men and women. I'll ask her. I can't be sure whether she'll do it or not, but I'll check with her.
Or just for ladies also.
Okay.
Ladies of Columbus.
No, I hear like she's one day is JSS she's glorifying Guru Maharaj for glorification in JSS Zoom. Yes. So It's very nice. She's mm,
Yeah. Yeah, good point, Dari, bro. I did notice that, and I asked her, "How is it that you spoke? Because you've not done something like this before." She said, "Because this is about just glorifying about Guru Maharaj, so it is very easy to just do it." By the way, she's a disciple of Ravindra Swarup Prabhu. She's a Siksha disciple of, Jayapatak Maharaj. But what is it? She serves on Guru Maharaj's medical team, and she just feels that to speak about glorify a Vaishnava, she can do it. But whether to when you speak, when you say Bhagavatam or any class, it means actually it involves a component of instruction and whatever, right? So I'm not sure if she'll do it. I can ask her, definitely. I will definitely ask her today itself. I'll let you know.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation for AC's Columbus devotee class, which is very good, very nice class, Prabhu. Was so wonderful. And when you come in America, definitely you can come in Columbus one day.
America.
Never been to America. You should come, Prabhu. It's not very
My
good.
wife,
but
my wife gave up her green card, and so I remember last year she gave a talk in her university called "Why I Gave Up My Green Card." So it's a Krishna conscious talk. Okay, we'll see. My Krishna will whatever.
if you can't come to America, we will come to Mayapur, and when we come to the Holy Dham, we will come and visit you, and we'll definitely would love to have Shiromani Mataji to speak. If not, if she gives some resistance, just say "Ei nivedhana dara sakiranu gata koro." We're all sakis anyway. That's the aspiration, at least. But thank you so much, Prabhu, again for coming and serving the Bhagavatam class. You're true, and it was very good to start the morning off this way, and we feel very purified by the vibration of the Bhagavatam coming from you. So thank you so much, Prabhu. We'll just end with Vaishnava pranams. Yes, Prabhu.
Where do I get the link to this class?
It'll be on our YouTube page. It'll be published on our ISKCON Columbus YouTube page. I can forward it to you.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Pancha kalpadrubhyascha kripasindhubhya eva cha.
Patitan Pavani.
His Grace Achintya Chaitanya Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Everybody can unmute and say big Hari Bol.
Hari
Hari
Bol.
Bol. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Also, we have so many guests today, so thank you everyone for joining and attending the call. This is our